before we jump into the passage, I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to help us see an overview of chapter 10 of Luke. Chapter 10 of Luke has a common theme of discipleship, true discipleship. And we see this, it starts out when Jesus sends out the 72 in the beginning of chapter 10. 72 disciples, Jesus sends them out, he's like, hey, go out, share the gospel, do these miracles, do all these things. And they go out and amazing things happen. And then they come back and they're rejoicing. Oh my goodness, Jesus, can you imagine how great those testimonies were? Like, there was this one guy there and it's like, bam, and he was healed. And bam, and that dude's healed too. Healings for you, healings for you, healings for everyone, you know? Everybody gets a healing, and it's so great. And everyone's having a great time. And so they go out with the authority of Jesus to preach the message of Jesus. So what we see there is that true disciples have the authority from Jesus. It's his authority, but by his name and by his power, we do his work. And then they come back and they rejoice. Jesus, you would not believe it. Even demons are subject to your name. That's what they say. But Jesus says, rejoice that your names are written in heaven. So Jesus is saying, listen, it's great that you're doing good work, but rejoice that you're saved and you know me. Rejoice that your future is secure in me. So we also see true disciples rejoice in their salvation, not just in work. In the next one, we see also that it's a famous parable of the Good Samaritan, which many of you have heard of. It's about a man walking. He's going from one city to another city, Jerusalem to Jericho. And while he's walking, he was mugged. And he's left on the street. And then, so can you imagine he's all hurt and he's on the street. And then they took all his money and he's just laying there. And he's so hurt. And then what happens? You guys know the story. A priest walks by. Looks at the guy, oh, how tragic. He keeps walking, you know? Levi walks by, sees him, terrible, terrible. And he keeps on walking. They don't help him. They're just like, oh, that's so bad. And then he just walk by. But the Samaritan, while walking by, and remember, Samaritan and Israelites are enemies. A Samaritan comes and Samaritan has compassion and takes care of him. And what we see there is we have a tendency, even in their time too, but even today, we have a tendency of thinking that true disciples are only certain types of people from certain backgrounds with certain jobs. But what we see here is that anyone can be a true disciple, anyone who follows Jesus, even a Samaritan. And lastly, we come to our passage today, Martha and Mary. Now, I love this story of Martha and Mary, so let's just jump right into it and let's see what we can learn about true discipleship. Verse 38. Now, as they went on their way, Jesus entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. Now, as some of you guys know, this is Jesus and the disciples, and we call them the God Squad. So Jesus and a squad roll up into this village. And then they're all coming in, and they're so tired, and they're moving around. And Martha hears Jesus has come. So Martha's all like, I have to invite Jesus to my house. And so Martha wants to serve Jesus and take care of Jesus. Verse 39. And she had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. Now, I want you to stop and think about this. And this especially works here because most of us are Korean. I want to ask you, especially for the students, what's the first thing your parents make you do when a pastor or an elder or a deacon comes to your house? Clean everything, yeah. When anyone, a pastor, elder, or deacon comes, your mom, red alert, you know, and then she gets mungie detectors, you know, and it's like, oh my goodness, like, oh, there's subatomic particles of mungie here, you know, like, let's wipe these all up. And so they're all like, so you have to clean everything. And as a child, where do you get? You always get the bathroom, you know, coincidentally always, you know. And so there you are, you're scrubbing the bathroom, you're making everything, you're washing all the towels, and then you have to clean your room, and no one's going to see your room, but you have to clean your room, and you have to do all these things. And what happens? after you clean everything in your house, the pastor, elder, or deacon comes in, and what's the first thing your mom says to them? I'm sorry it's so messy, you know? And you work so hard cleaning it. And that's what Martha's doing. Martha's working so hard because it's like, dude, Jesus is coming. So she's like working the place and she's making it all clean and she's preparing food. She's doing all these things for him. So Martha's working so hard, she's everywhere. And then she's working in the kitchen, doing all these things, and she's cleaning the floor, and she's doing all these things. And then in the corner of her eye, she sees something. She sees her younger sister, Mary, sitting at the feet of Jesus. And Martha gets bitter. Verse 40, we see, but Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to Jesus and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. So Martha is angry. Martha's very, very, very angry. And why is she so angry? Well, I want you to really think about, and this is a message that's really going to make sense for those of us who have siblings, okay? I have a younger sister, so I know what this is like. As children with siblings, we tend to get very angry when we're suffering and our sibling is not. Like, why am I working and she's not working? You know, that's how we feel. Martha is so angry because Martha feels like she's the only one sacrificing. She feels like she's the only one going through a hard time. She's like, why do I have to struggle when Mary's having a good time? But I think this is a big issue because if you think about it, Martha, if you really think about it, Martha's the one that invited Jesus. Martha's the one that said, Jesus, come. What does that mean? Martha probably wanted to sit at Jesus' feet too. Martha probably wanted to be there too. But Martha felt like, listen, Mary, I want to do what you're doing too, but I can't because I have responsibilities. I can't be there because someone has to do the work. And so Martha felt like she's sacrificing, but she got bitter because she felt like she's the only one sacrificing. And so she starts to get jealous and irritated and frustrated. But why was Martha serving and not sitting at Jesus' feet? Why was Martha doing this work and not spending time with God? Because Martha thought being with Jesus is not as important as serving Jesus. Martha thought serving Jesus was more important than being with Jesus. So that's what Martha's thinking. Now, is Martha right? No, she's wrong. And Jesus is going to start to correct her. We see this in verse 41. But the Lord answered, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things. Now, I want you to see that. Jesus, when he sees Martha's busyness, Jesus doesn't just blast Martha. Jesus doesn't roast Martha on the spot. Jesus is so kind. Jesus shows that Martha is just overwhelmed. And Jesus is saying, Martha, I can see you're very overwhelmed by all these good things. I can see that you're overwhelmed. I can see that you're trying to do good. But your obsessions, Martha, are leading you away from spending time with me. Sometimes it's our good obsessions that keep us away from Jesus. And Jesus is saying, I can see you're so obsessed with getting everything so right that you're not spending time with me. I want you to think about Martha's situation. Martha was so distracted with serving Jesus, she forgot to enjoy that Jesus is literally right in front of her. She forgot to enjoy that. So Jesus is saying, listen, Martha, what you're doing is all good, but Martha, you forgot the most important thing. Verse 42, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her. So Jesus says being with Jesus is more important than serving Jesus. Being with Jesus is more important than serving Jesus. Now, I can share with all of you guys, honestly, this is hard. It's hard. It's hard to just sit and be with Jesus. And especially as a minister, because I feel like I have so much work to do. It's hard to just sit with Jesus. It is. But Jesus is being and sitting and staying and spending time with Jesus is the priority. And he says, Mary has chosen the good portion. Mary has chosen what was right. In fact, he goes as far as to say, Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. And so what Jesus is saying is, no matter how much people pressure Mary, this will not be taken from her. Her time with Jesus is not just priority, it's protected in God's eyes. It's protected. This is what God wants. And so tying this up with all that we saw in Luke 10, we recognize true discipleship sees spending time with Jesus as priority. True discipleship sees spending time with Jesus as priority. Because people might think true discipleship is only about serving Jesus and working for Jesus, but actually spending time with Jesus is a priority for true disciples. Spending time with Jesus. So I have two very simple application points. First one is this: worship leads to work. Worship leads to work. Now, I know it's hard to say being with Jesus is more important than spending time with Jesus. And I think one reason why it's so hard for me is because I was born and raised in America. I was born and raised here. And I have a very can-do attitude. I feel like whenever there's work, I feel like I gotta do it and I can do it. And I feel, because I was born here, I feel this obsession for productivity. I feel this obsession for effectiveness. I want to always make things better. I want to always work harder. I believe so strongly in this meritocracy. And so I want to always do better. And maybe you guys feel it too. I'm sure even for the young students, you guys feel it, especially when you start going to high school, you always feel like it's a competition with someone next to you. You might study, for SATs, but someone else goes to a Hagwon, and someone else goes to a SAT boot camp, And it's like this intellectual escalation, And there's always someone out there who's doing more than you, and you feel like, oh, I gotta beat them, I think it's one reason why whenever you're in class, when you think you did well, what's the first thing you do? Ask someone else to score, Like you got a 96, and then let's say I got a 96, and I'm like, oh man, this is pretty good. Turn to Brian, what'd you get, Brian? And Brian's like, oh, I didn't even study. I did so bad. I got a 98, And so in my mind, I burned now. Oh, I'm gonna show that Brian, I'm gonna show him what's up, Just watch. Next week, I pull up an all-nighter, and then I study all night. Pull up an all-nighter. I walk into class. I get 100%. I go to Brian. Oh, with no amount of studying, I got 100. And we have this desire within us to always feel like we're progressing. And we feel like we're progressing when we work. But Jesus is showing that the way we truly progress in the spiritual life is spending time with Jesus. It's not just through working, but spending time with Jesus. Worship is foundational. Worship is foundational. Which leads us to the question, if everyone focuses on worship, who's going to do the work? And that's a very easy answer. The worshipers will do the work. Worship leads to work. Because the example I always give is later on in the book of John, in another book, you see Mary come to Jesus and pours out the expensive ointment on his feet and wipes his feet with her hair. Mary did that work, not Martha. Worship leads to work. True worship leads to work. When we focus on work, we start to burn out. We start to forget about Jesus like Martha, and we get busy doing all these things, and we get bitter when other people don't serve. But when we focus on worship, it leads to true work. Love leads to obsession. Love leads to work. The example I can give to you is, as many of you guys know, I was an art student before I went into, so after high school, I went to art for illustration rather than going straight to a normal college. And when I was an artist, when I was doing artwork, oh my goodness, can you imagine the type of homework that they gave us? So we have like paper this big. And then the instructor's all like, okay, I want you to fill 20 pages of your signature. Okay, I love my name, but not that much. But you're just sitting there. And so when you just focus on the 20 pages, you're just like, oh my goodness. You take like a Red Bull, all right, let's crank these out. And you just keep doing that. And it seems like such a drudgery. It seems like, oh, why am I doing this? Oh, it's just busy work. And it's just hard to see. It's hard to get excited about. But when you focus on your love of art, and when they explain to you, you work on your signature because you want to work on that expression of your name, and what you're about, of your artwork, then 20 pages goes by fast. And there's been many times where I had to just sit down and we had all these pages. And what do we have to do? They wouldn't even let us draw cool stuff. They wouldn't even let us draw what we want to draw. They said, all right, now what you're going to do is get a nail clipper. Okay, like there's other ways to hint at, but get a nail clipper and then hold it like this. Draw this nail clipper. Then you draw it, now like this. Now like this. Oh, and then they keep on going, and then, okay, now this. Now this. Oh, now this. And then, so you're filling up pages and pages and pages of this. And it feels like, oh, this work never ends. I hate this. But when you're in love with art, and when you realize that all these exercises are helping you to create your art, then you keep doing it. What you see is love leads to work. Real love leads to work. Real love causes you to go on and on and on and on and on because you're in love. Worship leads to work. And that's why we spend time with Jesus. Because it's not just about doing this work, because then we get caught up in the work and it feels like so much and feels so boring. But when we get caught up in Jesus, we fall in love with Jesus, when we're overwhelmed and in love with Jesus, then we can do the work. So the first is worship leads to work. And the second and last application is worth is not in work. Worth is not in work. Martha was working all these things. Mary was sitting at Jesus' feet, worshiping. And that teaches us something. Jesus can love you, and Jesus does love you, even when you're not productive. I remember when I was, especially for the high school students, when I was your guys' age, my dad would sometimes ask me, like, what am I doing? What are you up to right now, And the one thing I would never say to him is, I'm bored. Because then he's like, oh, you bored, huh? I'll give you something to do, So I would never say, I learned, never say I am bored. Never say I have free time, And so I learned, and during those times, I learned how to, as a high school student, I would be very good at pretending to be busy, Like the moment the moment you hear the door open, textbooks open, And then I could have been taking a nap right before, but then I wake up, I go into bed, and then they're like, how are you doing? Tired, Oh, my neck, And because I felt this pressure to always be productive. I felt this pressure to always look busy. I felt this pressure to always look like I'm producing, like I'm always progressing. And I think for me, what happened is after I got saved, I think this idea kind of snuck into my walk with God. And I started acting as if I always had to be productive before God. As if God would ask me, Daniel, what are you doing with your time right now? Oh, I was just on my way to read the Bible. Funny. Oh, coincidence. Wow, I was just on my way to my morning prayer time. Oh my goodness, Lord, and I feel this need where I feel like I always have to look like I'm progressing before God, as if I always have to impress God. And I felt this pressure, like I would always have to be like, oh, on Sundays I have to come like acting like, oh, I had a victorious week. You did it. Oh, scoff, like I felt like I had to do all this. I felt like I had to progress to be loved and accepted by God. But what we see in this passage is God loves Jesus. Jesus just loves Mary as Mary just spends time with Jesus. That spending time with Jesus is never seen as a waste of time. Spending time with Jesus is never something that we should be ashamed of. It's okay if we're not progressing and producing and doing these works. And sometimes what we need the most is to just rest before Jesus. Spend time before Jesus. Take time and enjoy him. I love one thing that Charles Spurgeon said. As many of you know, I read a lot of his books. I love him. Spurgeon says a lot of times that we wrongly think rest is wasted time. But he says rest is not wasting time. Rest is where you recharge strength for more work. So rest in the presence of God. Sit with God. Stay with Jesus. Enjoy Jesus. And so I want to encourage all of us, let's spend that time worshiping before Jesus, resting before Jesus. And when we feel like the imaginary God in our head, like the one example I just did, like if you imagine God saying, "What are you doing right now?" Never be ashamed to say, "God, to tell that voice, like, I just want to spend time with you." I want you to have that kind of mindset. I want you guys to be able to just let go of the progress and the production and rest. Rest in the presence of God. Let's pray.